Hi there, and welcome to the Class Solutions Dental Education Podcast, where we are trying to keep it real, keep it practical, and keep it focused on helping you build the dental practice of your dreams. I'm your host, Phil Cole, and today we're diving into a topic that we are getting a lot of people talking about. We're taking a good, honest look at what private equity is in dentistry, the good, the bad, and yes, even the ugly. Whether you're thinking about selling, holding strong, or just trying to figure out what all this buzz is about that we get from young and old doctors, this is the podcast, I think, for you. And joining me today, I have the privilege of having Joseph Lucido, managing partner of Clear to Launch Dental Solutions. Joe brings years of experience and a sharp perspective on the private equity world. And he's not here to sugarcoat anything. We're here to talk strategy, opportunity, and how private equity is really shaping the future of dentistry. And is it for better or worse? So I would say grab a coffee and let's get started. Joseph, thank you very much for being on today's podcast.
No, thank you for having me. Looking forward to it.
Give me a little insight of yourself, and just so that the viewers know with your company and so forth.
Sure. Our organization, we do a lot of marketing, Clear to Launch Dental marketing, but inside that, we work with a lot of private equity companies, and that has given us this unique viewpoint of, what's great about it and then what's not so great about it. And then after studying private equity for a while, you kind of have this comprehensive picture of like, okay, how does this fit into dentistry today and where it's going?
Yeah, and I think that right now, as we were speaking before we started, is, we are getting a ton of young ones, that are graduating from the colleges and stuff like that. I just got a contract yesterday that someone from MUSC wanted me to review their contract for them. That is what they think a private practice, but really is a private equity practice, because when you start looking in the contract and how it's written, there's 8 locations, and so you're getting into that private equity, even though they might give that idea. So I mean, let's just start with the good first. Like in your eyes, what's the good part? Because there's this stigmatism of private equity, and I think that private equity also can be broken down, in my opinion, and I guess this will be my first thought for you to tell us. Private equity to me, there's a couple different ways. DSOs, when I hear DSOs, I'm thinking the large, major companies that we're talking 50 plus. I would even maybe go even more than 50, 100 plus locations, stuff like that. Private equity to me, though, is still the guys that can be as low as, trying to get that starting group of like 15 to 20 locations, build it to that 50 to sell off to the DSOs. Right. Would you agree with that, or what's your idea of private equity?
Yeah, there's different size private equity groups, and they do enter the situation. We've seen some as small as, they have 3 and they're going to build off what they call a platform company. And at different stages of this, the 5, 10, 15, and then all the way up to, we work with groups that have 200 practices, and how is the capital involved there? Really understanding how private equity works, big picture, is really important. Most private equity groups, they raise a fund and then they have 5 or 7 years to turn that over, meaning they need to sell it up the chain to someone else. And so depending where they're at in that cycle, they may behave differently. So yeah, the good of it being they can provide you a lot of operational support. A lot of private equity companies tend to be very sophisticated, meaning that they can give you, okay, here's what we do for operations, for billing, for marketing, insert the blank. They have a lot of professionals on staff. That's the good. The good being, they can take your business and, really send it on a rocket really quickly. And just allow you to take advantage of opportunity in any specific marketplace.
Yeah, I think the thing that the good part of it is like you said, the systems they definitely have down. They've a good private equity, I should say.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
think, I think the bad part of that, I guess, if you want to go bounce on that thing, is some of the newer ones that are trying, like you said, I think with the 3 to 7 range. I think a lot of those guys are looking for a platform. They're trying to develop it per se more than they actually have one. But I will agree with you. The good thing about it is they understand systems and how important protocols and systems are for dental practice.
Yeah, the good ones are there to support you and they have the experience to do it. Some groups, they'll have taken a group of 10 and they've taken them to 200 and they successfully sell it. That's great. And if they're doing that again, going along with that group, those credentials go a long way. Now, the downside of it, which is, they are very finance oriented, they are very numbers oriented. So if they need a certain number to say something, they will strip expenses very quickly. They very much focus on the bottom line. The great ones focus on everything, but you can almost view it as a scale. The worst private equity companies, they do not care about patients. They do not care about doctors. All they care about is, can I get this business to say it does X dollars and then sell it to someone else? And unfortunately, we have seen that. There is a lot of money in the market right now, specifically for medical, dental, just because they are great businesses when they're run well. And there are some people who just have access to a lot of capital, unfortunately,
Yeah.
and they decide to start a private equity company that, wink, wink, supports dentists. And the reality is they're just looking to make a bunch of money.
Yeah, and I think that with those, for the audience when they listen to, is you've dealt with them just as like I have. When you see the heads, kind of the head of the division for going out and finding practices, and this seat, I guess if you want to call it the operations officer, COO, or even sometimes a CEO. We've seen that where they've hit kind of their limit per se, and they've kind of go like, okay, and now they're with, all of a sudden they go from one DSO / one private equity to, hey, by the way, I just gave you a call, I'm over here now.
Right.
And they're putting that all together and they're starting all over again. And those are the kind of things that I think that's one of those situations where that kind of gives me the nervousness of it, because then it's like, okay, what happened to the other one? You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Where did it go wrong here? That can be a red flag. But I do think that it is such a polarizing topic, and it is something that we get asked about a lot. And I think these groups are understanding that, like, hey, we're not generally liked, and they're doing something about it, compared to 5 years ago, where it was kind of the Wild West. We're seeing a lot more supportive private equity firms coming in and doing it the right way. So we're in this, I think, this transitionary period. And, like I said, it's always going to be a scale of, how great the group is that's supporting you. But yeah, there's just a lot of nuance and a lot of things to consider and think about before, getting into bed with a private equity group.
I would agree with you that I do think that they're being a little bit more, they're being a little bit more, what I would say, you're right. Five, maybe 10 years ago, for sure. 10 years ago, depending on what areas of the country.
Right.
Also, they didn't care. They came in with they just swooped in, and it was like, we're eating you alive. And that's all there is to it. I do think that they are trying to get rid of that stigmatism. I do think the other thing too, and I don't know if you've noticed this, but I think the other thing is these guys are having just as hard a time finding associates, finding people to work those practices as any private doctor is. And I think that has caused them to, in my opinion, that's one of the factors that's caused them to have to say, we can't be the bully anymore. In fact, instead, we got to change the stigmatism of what we are, and we got to start playing a little bit nicer in the sandbox, because we can't allow ourselves to lose out on these associate opportunities.
Well, exactly. And some of these younger docs, I think it comes down to an incentives issue. If no one wants to work hard building someone else's business. And there are many different ways in, these associate agreements and working with groups and even working by yourself. Like, what is that like? Are our incentives aligned? Like, if you help me grow and you're here for a certain amount of time and you build a great practice and a great reputation, then you should be rewarded for that. And in the past, I don't think they necessarily did that. They gave you a high salary, but I think people are wisening up to, okay, if I'm going to be a part of this, what is really being a part of it? We know some people that absolutely love their private equity company. They'll be like, yeah, they support us like you wouldn't believe. They compensate us well. And then, when it does turn over in that 5 to 7 years, like, I have ownership in this, and they couldn't be happier. Some of the worst parts about a business for running a practice for a doctor is the business stuff. And some of these DSOs are like, we're going to take all this off your plate and you just do production, and it's like, that's the dream for some docs. So everyone's in a different situation, but yes, for sure they are understanding, like you said, the analogy is great. Like in the sandbox, like, okay, how do we play together? Because they realize when everyone's happy, everything just goes better.
Yeah, I think the other thing that I've noticed too is we're now looking at these contracts as we review them, for the associates. A lot of times, I've noticed that the pay scale has leveled off too. It's more of an even playing field now versus you. Once again, 5 years ago, or more, those guys were coming out with just some ridiculous daily. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, it was just like I don't know what to tell you, because to the private doctors, it's like, I don't know what to tell you because you're not going to be able to compete to $1,000 a day. Or I think the biggest one we had was $1,200 a day. And that was, to me, was one of the, guaranteed. And to me, it was just one of those things where, like, how you're putting a financial pinch on that front administration area to really make sure that this person is producing. But I've started noticing, in the last couple of years, this year right now, as we're reviewing them, they're back down into the 650s, 750s, a little bit more what I would consider normal stuff. And so I think that that's also going to be what I would say probably a good thing for private equity, is to kind of get back into a little bit more of the mean, if I could say that.
Yeah, it's you look at, and especially, put yourself in a young doc's shoes, and it's, they're saddled with $300,000-$400,000 in debt. And it's like, well, those numbers, sometimes they do think short term and long term. And then you look at it from the private equity side. We've seen situations where they'll buy practices and they're like, yeah, we're marketing for it, but we don't have a doc that's there. And I'm like, this has been 3 months. So this is just a capital burn on your side. And they're like, we will pay anything to get a doc in there. So there's a lot of factors at play. But like I said, I think it's less loosey-goosey and more calculated than it used to be. But like I said, there's a lot of, I think the last total for private equity dollars, there's $3 trillion committed, dry powder out there. So this money needs to get spent. So I think the advantage, the leverage is going to return to the doc's favor sooner than later. And you're already seeing, that trend.
So let me ask you this then. I mean, for marketing purposes, like you just mentioned that, hey, we've been trying to market and get this. What do you think what do you come across as being one of the best possible ways of attracting associates? Like, is there a marketing feature that can help them, or is it just, I mean, to me, I just saw a stat, and you can tell me, because once again, you're in marketing as well, that 33% of private dentists, I think it was 32 or I think it was 33 though, 32 or 33% of dentists do not have a website.
Okay.
So would you say that's way too, that report that I saw is out of line? Or, I mean, because I see a lot of dentists that don't have websites.
Yeah, there is a shocking number of dentists who, ones that are successful, that have been successful, or that are struggling, that they either don't have one or they don't put much thought into it. And yeah, the number is still really high. And that goes back to, this is one of those business functions of, if you want to work somewhere, so let's say associate, let's say OM, let's say anyone, and you're trying to attract talent, like, one of the first things they're going to do is look you up online. That's what everyone does. So we need to make sure that you have some sort of first impression that gives off, hey, I'm competent, or at least I'm competent enough to hire someone to make sure that they take care of this critical impression, of my practice. So yeah, when it comes to attracting associates, from either a DSO standpoint, or if it's a private practice trying to do that, people want to work somewhere that looks fun, even has the appearance of being fun or professional, or, they have it together. And you can do a lot of that with what your social media look like, what your website look like, because that gives them confidence in like, okay, this is a successful business.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I was wondering, since you work with so many private equity, if that ever comes up, to them, because I've seen some private equity groups too that, they throw a website together real quick, and it's just like there's
Oh yeah.
nothing,
Yeah.
no information. You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
it's the same as the good and the bad and the ugly. Like we see some that it's like we want to invest heavily in marketing because we want to look the best and attract the best. Other people, it's a bottom line thing. It's like each practice gets a couple $100, build a template website, that's it. So there's again this scale. It just depends on what you prioritize. Obviously, being the CEO of a marketing company, we prioritize it a lot, and we just like to let people make their own decision. It's like, okay, if you want to work with this group or you want to be a patient of this practice, let's compare these apples to apples. And I just think it's kind of the starting point for everything. Now you have to back that up with being a good business behind it. You don't want to put lipstick on a pig, but at the same time,
Yeah.
we want to represent what you do in the real world, on this digital world. We just want to put you off on a good start.
So how many people do you feel that with the private equity, I know that doctors always sit there and say that, we're just getting, we can't find private practice doctors say we can't ever find an associate because the DSOs are out there just hounding us at all times to, sell our practices. And then we hear from the dental schools and stuff like that, that that they're trying to go in and suck up the new graduates for their stuff. I mean, how much marketing do you feel as though these private equities put into going after talent versus going after the practice itself?
Oh, I firsthand, there's entire departments that work after, going after associates, going to the dental schools and kind of having the first crack at this. And the messaging is simple. It's like, you're in a ton of debt. We can help you get out of it. You walk right into a great system. And some of them do that. Not all of them. I would say in the ones that we work with, probably about 50% know that that's a priority because it's talent. They call it talent.
Right.
It's like, where are we going to get our talent? And they know most likely it's not going to be a very seasoned, doctor, unless they're in a financial situation where they're being forced to join one of these groups. But we've also seen that situation where there's these great docs have these great businesses, and they offer them almost double what they would get on the private market, which is really hard to turn down. I don't judge any doc for selling to a DSO when they offer you life-changing money that no one else is going to give you. What are you going to do? But yeah, when you're talking about specifically, not to go on a tangent, getting back to attracting talent at these places. Yeah. So if I'm a private practice, one, great private practices that we know that incentivize associates well to be part of their business, like they never have a problem. But if you just want to blame like, DSOs are taking everything, like, that's the victim narrative. And yeah, it is true. It's just one variable in this dental industry pie.
I think for us, the other thing is too that I stress to these guys is once again, and this is the coaching side of me speaking, is the fact that you'll watch Bar Rescue, you'll watch Kitchen Nightmares, and you see these, but it's the same thing. They always talk about the same thing, right? You have no systems. You're running around like a chicken with your head cut off. You're not paying attention to your bottom line. And I preach it all the time, and probably the people that listen to this podcast probably say, "Oh, he's going to get on his soapbox again." But that's that is one of the reasons why the DSO world is around and private equity is still around, because there's a lot of them that fail. There was back before COVID, there was I think it was 2018 that they said there was 100 private equity groups that started and only 10 remained by the end of the year. There was like a huge fall off that they just don't make it, right? Because once again, they don't have, going back to that, systems. But I always tell these doctors, the private doctors, they always want to know, how do I compete against private equity? One of the biggest ways you compete against it is exactly that: systems.
Right.
And knowing your break even point, and knowing, like, when we do transitions, it's amazing, Joseph, how many times we look and it's like zero marketing.
Hmm.
you know well, I don't need to market, I'm in a rural area. And or how many doctors come to us and say, we have one in Oklahoma, we have one in Texas right now, I want to bring on an associate and then sell it. I want to work it a couple of years and then sell it. And I'm like, you don't have any room for an associate. Like,
Right.
so where did this idea come from? And that's one of those things where I got to say, the good part of private equity is those guys create and have their systems, and they follow it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And that is the biggest upside to it. Now, if you want to do this without private equity, it's a very simple thing. Like, I like to appeal to people's logical side of their brain. Like, you're not doing your own, most docs aren't doing their own taxes, as they shouldn't. They're paying someone that's passed test, and they study this and they know what they do. So you outsource that. And at the end of the day, you need to outsource a ton of stuff. 50% of the books behind me are on marketing, and they're all outdated. Like, we have teams of people that work on this 24/7. If you think you're going to do the DIY approach to any of these things, like, it's not going to go well. It's just,
Yeah.
you're going to spend a lot of time, energy, and effort, and it's just not going to work. So when we put systems in place, that's exactly right. Like, marketing systems, accounting systems, hiring systems. And I think thinking through it that lens, it makes it feasible to have a business that you can actually sell. And I encourage, there's a great book called Start at the End. There's some stuff in there that's a bit antiquated, but just the title gives you an idea. I think every doc should get into business and then think like, okay, well, what's the end goal for me? Do I want to run this till I'm 65? Do I want to work 3 days a week? Or do I want to sell it at 50 and be done? And once you have a crystal clear idea of that, then you can work backwards. And then you got to figure out the different pieces that go into place. And the people that we work with, and that is their goal. I have them read the book, and they, their mind explodes. I'm like, yeah, but at the same time, it's the most logical thing that you can do is put systems in place, because as a doc, you're going to run out of capacity really quick, especially if you're successful.
Right.
Especially if you're successful, it gets, you get pinched pretty quick.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing when it comes to marketing. Once again, is they all want to know how the DSOs and the private equity are doing so well. But I tell them, the ones that are doing well, I mean, there's no doubt about it, they're putting money into marketing. And that's another phrase I always, I heard when I started dentistry 25 years ago. I always heard, just the phrase was, hang a shingle and they'll come, for
Oh
a
yeah.
dentist.
Yeah.
But that's just not the way it is anymore in this day and age. I mean, especially now. I mean, the thing that you got to be probably getting into, because I'm starting to see it with the private equities too, is these guys are nailing the AI. So I
Yep.
got to assume that you've got to be coming across on that, on the marketing side of things. And so if they have this, then once again, in what you're saying with the private doctor, if you don't have some of these important things farmed out, then you're not competing with what is actually taking place.
Well, not only are you not competing, you're probably just throwing dollars away. And that's one of the biggest things that we see is they're like, I need to do something. And they're like, I'm going to throw X dollars at marketing and hopefully it fixes it. And what I tell everyone is we have a CE that we teach, and it's like, here's how you need to think about it, because you have to have at least an understanding of what's going on so you can hire the correct company. But yeah, there's a handful of great dental specific marketing companies across the nation. There's probably about 200, and I would say there's about 6 of them that I would say they're doing a great job. And but the challenge is when a private equity company, that's why we work with so many, they go, oh, you guys get it, and then it would just be really hard to compete with us, or there are any of these other ones out there. And so, especially, because we use a lot of AI, and we're not talking about writing blog posts. That's like the most base level thing that people do, and it actually is not great, but it's the predictive analytics, like real time changes to stuff. Like, we can see what people are saying and then feed it back to them. We're talking 24-hour changes, and just the AI is a huge component of it. But then rudimentary, like, let's go back to 33% of dentists either don't have a website or they have a bad one. Like, so we tell people like, hey, you can just fix some of the basic things and it's going to go so far. And then doing that in the right order is probably the most important thing. You know, you don't need to start with TikTok. It's like, hey, let's get the Google reviews in place first.
Right.
You know, let's fix your SEO and your website. Let's start there because that sometimes fixes the problem. So yeah,
but I think that's the part though where you go the good, the bad, the ugly. That's right. The ugly part that I think they get that attached to them. But I have to also say, when I would talk to private doctors, I tell them that you can think that that's ugly because of the marketing and stuff like that, but it's actually one of the things that you should learn from them. The smart thing to learn from them, because yes, I know you don't have $30,000-$40,000 to spend like they do a month on, marketing per se. But the point of it is like you said, when you start looking at these guys and, I had a doctor just recently, we were talking about marketing, and he said, oh yeah, this company that I had, they wanted to charge me $500 a month for SEO. And I said, and so you thought that was not good, and he was just like, oh, I think that was just outrageous. How dare they think I got to spend? I'm like, doctor, I'm just going to tell you right now, in my opinion, you probably don't have a good marketing team until they start charging at least about $1,000 a month for SEO and what's entailed in that.
Right.
And he's just like, well, that I will never do marketing then. And I'm like, and then that's why but this was exactly his point. His point was the whole premise was he was complaining about private equity and DSOs. And I can't, it doesn't matter. You can't compete anyway. So why have a website? I'm like,
yeah. So the best way that this has taken me a decade to figure out. But the biggest thing now, what we teach to people is, okay, he doesn't want to pay $500. Well, how much is your lifetime patient value? How much is the average patient worth to you? And I do not care about that number, because it is so I am invested in you knowing that number. National average is going to tell you around $5,000 to $8,000, but some practices it's $2,000. Some cosmetic places it's $25,000. And I had to explain this analogy to someone. I said, okay, let's say that we can figure out that it costs $200 to acquire a patient, and they're worth $5,000 to you. Let's play a game. I'm going to give you $5,000 in return. You give me $200. How many times would you do that? And the answer is you would go to the bank and take out the biggest loan possible and just make that trade over and over again. And obviously there's going to be a law of diminishing returns. But I think when it comes to marketing, you need to understand before anything, how much is my patient worth? Because then you can know how much to acquire them. And this is the inside of what private equity does. They know that number to the penny. And it's like, okay, we know that each patient in this geographic area is going to cost this to get this. We will pay $1 more than that. And they don't even have to, but it's like they understand that math trade. And when you logically think of it like that, well, all of a sudden it's like, okay, then marketing doesn't have a budget attached to it. It's more of like, okay, what is the best patient I can get in and how much do they cost? And then that way it's not $500, because, if we bought, that doctor who didn't want to pay $500, well, if I brought you $40,000 in production, how much would you pay me? And then they're like, okay, then they scratch their head. So that's just a better way to think about marketing and marketing budgets, because sometimes you don't need to spend anything. Like, hey, just fix your website and, and keep the word of mouth going and maybe do some light SEO, and that's it. Like, you don't need to spend, $50,000 a month. So yeah, there's a lot of nuance to that.
And so I'm glad that you bring that up, because that's the thing that I think is important. And when I go back to the private equity again with the systems, so the marketing system, but for us, for coaching, right? I'll get doctors all the time, like, I don't want to do consulting, coaching, whatever, because, I'm not paying no $50,000-$60,000, a year to have that. But then once again, if you give me $50,000 and I can give you in a 12-month period a $350,000 return, you would, if I was to say that to the stock market, you'd buy that stock in a second. But for some reason, you don't want to do that. And I think this is the biggest, I don't know what it is in dental, but and it's in healthcare for sure. I know it because of in the medical too, in the vet world. I don't know what it is, but that's the thing is there you can directly put numbers to everything. So just like you said, the lifetime patient value, you can directly put that towards, give me $200 for that patient and I'll give you $5,000 in marketing in return. My coaching, KPIs that we do, right? KPI monitoring and making sure, because every time that system goes bad, when I speak, I show the no-shows and cancellations, right? And that there's so many things, marketing, the presence, like, can they go on the website and schedule, doing different things like that. No-shows and cancellations, though, when you add that up and you can see that two no-shows in a hygiene department can cost you $50,000 for the year if that happens every week. They don't think anything of that, right? It's no big deal. And I think that's the thing that they have to. So it's that bar rescue type thing, right? They want to ignore it. I don't want to maybe be bothered with it. I don't want to do that business part, but it's reaching out to you. In marketing, it's reaching out to other companies, to help guide them on that stuff so that you can see that, because that's what the private equity guys are doing. They're hiring that all out. It's all being done.
And they tie a number to it, and that they tie a number to everything. And just so your business, my business, and I think it's really hard for docs to quantify numbers that they don't see. If I say, hey, you missed all this and you have to write me a check for $350,000, they'd say, wait a minute, I'll pay for this. And it's, when you put it into context like that, like, oh, you're losing 2 patients a week. Well, here's what it looks like in total. It's really hard for them to grasp that concept. But that's, the ones that get it, those are the ones that are really successful. The best practices we work with are the ones who get the math thing. And I understand that the math is so important, but it can be, really hard for, some docs can be very resistant to that side of the business for whatever reason. I'm not here to argue why they should or shouldn't do it. But one of the simplest examples is being taxed. Like, you could do your own taxes and you might, miss a $20,000 deduction. Well, you might pay an accountant $5,000 and they find that $20,000 deduction. So you save $15,000. Like, that math is so clean. And you can understand that example. Well, it works like that when you outsource anything. That's the whole thing. You're trading dollars to make your business better. And, quantifying that is very important.
Yeah, no, I agree 100% with you. And the taxes is a great example of that as well, because I think the other thing is tell me if you agree on this, though. I also am a very firm believer in sticking with dental specific companies as well. I think that the biggest thing, like a marketing company, you're dental specific. Going to just any general marketing business is not the way to go, because of the fact that they don't know, they're missing out on the nuances of this business.
So when in the CE we teach on how to choose a marketing company, that's the number one thing. Make sure they're dental specific. Just because these other marketing companies, they don't know what they don't know. Just like an accountant who doesn't specialize in dental, they don't know what they don't know. And a simple example is, we know from looking at website analytics, the second most visited page on any website is the Meet the Doctor page. That needs to be front and center, and it needs to have these characteristics. Unless you've built thousands of dental websites, there's no way that you're going to know that. And that's one of 100 nuances. And then same thing with SEO, paid search campaigns, everything is, we have so many reps and iterations into that. Just as any dental specific marketing company would, you see patterns, and it allows you to just be more efficient with the dollars spent. That's probably the biggest thing when it's non-dental specific, is there's just so much waste, because they're trying to figure it out and they're using your dollars to do that.
Right.
And, versus, we've got tens of millions of marketing spend. And so your practice in Denver, Colorado learned everything from all the marketing that we did in New York last year. And, every location is specific with competition, what you offer, the demographics. But we have a head start. We're 90% of the way there before we even, go. And that's what it's going to be, dental specific consulting, dental specific accounting. It's, it's a huge leg up, and it would just be highly illogical not to use a dental specific company for your practice.
Yeah, no, I agree wholeheartedly with you. And I think that that is, like I said, one of the good part of the private equity world. If you learn anything from that, it's the systems.
Yep.
I mean, they have it. And not only that, but the private equity world, those that don't make it are the ones that did not follow a good platform, right?
Right.
They went out and they tried to do things. I think that one of the things in dental, they tried to go cheap, basically,
Yep.
and it didn't work for them. And now that private equity is gone, and moved on. So I think that those are some really good insights for us. So I'm gonna just recap here. The good, the bad, the ugly. We went through it. I think that there's a lot of things to be learned, but give us just real quick. How does someone reach out to you? I know we talked about marketing, your marketing company. How does someone reach out to you if they are interested, so that they can help with that, aspect of their office?
Yeah. And if they have, any questions of, hey, I need some advice on here's the current marketing plan that maybe I'm getting set up with, cleartolaunchdental.com. And then under our resources page, which, I think it's got a couple thousand views now, it's the 3-step marketing framework. This is the framework we take individual practices through, and this is the framework that we take private equity through. It's the same. It's a system. It's a marketing system, and there's customizability inside that system. But it's the framework that has worked for every practice that we've worked with over the last decade. So yeah, cleartolaunchdental.com. Yeah, that's it.
Awesome. So I really appreciate you being on and going through this with us. It was really enjoyable. If you enjoy our show, please rate, review us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm your host, Phil Cole, and thanks for listening. Have a great day.